My Friday night movie recommendation is King Kong from 1933. The film was directed by Miriam C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schwarzak, and I'm going to try to convince you why you should watch a black and white film from 1933. First of all, this film of King Kong is considered by many, including Rotten Tomatoes, to be the best horror film made in the United States. This thing was made in 1933. Okay, give you an idea of what was happening in 1933. The U.S. was in the midst of a huge depression. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, was inaugurated as the President of the United States. He would later go on to serve 3 terms. The Lone Ranger debuted on radio in 1933, and Prohibition was repealed in December of that year. And here's why you should watch it. The special effects of this film are really amazing. They hold up. They really have great legs. A guy named Willis H. O'Brien was in charge of the special effects, and he had done some other stop motion animation films before this that were fantasy and caveman type stuff, and also westerns. he proved his chops, so he would do a pretty good job doing this. They made some interesting choices too, like the human eye have whites in them. Gorilla's eyes have blacks, and they decide, you know what? Let's make Kong. Kong's a giant gorilla. Who knows what happens to his eyes? We're going to make them white. This really allowed Kong to emote much better. Now, they had a full-size King Kong head for the close-ups. They had a giant hand for grabbing people. They had a giant foot for stomping on people. And yeah, he even kind of threw in a couple natives into his mouth while he was at it. We'll get to that in a moment. They also did an armature that was about 16 inches tall. And it was covered with trimmed rabbit fur, as well as, the rubber for the hands and the face and what have you. They did a prototype, which is affectionately referred to as long-faced. And they did this so that they could show some footage to the studio so they could prove the technology behind what they were doing. Because this was the Depression, and this movie ran about $500,000 to make. I mean, there was some big stakes in this. RKO was teetering at this time. But the footage was great. They came up with a method for rear projection where they would have a movie going on or a scene going on in the background while they did the animation to provide depth. They did this because by having a cooling fan on the film that was doing the projection so it wouldn't get overheated and melt. That was just some of the tricks. They used so many tricks, and you can really see it being pulled off here. As they moved forward, they did a second armature, and this one's called round face because the face on it's just slightly more round than the other one. And they did this because they realized if they had 2 armatures, they could have 2 teams working, doing the stop motion, and double the rate of the productivity to get this movie into the box office. So that's what they did. The special effects should have won an Oscar. Now you may think, what, this thing didn't win an Oscar for special effects? Well, there was no special effects category at this time. And the Academy was lobbied very hard to create a special effects category just so that they could hand Kong that award. Well, they didn't do that. They gave they thought they would compromise and give a technical merit award, which really didn't cut the mustard, especially for the audience, which now had, I mean, they came to Kong in droves because they just were amazed. They were transported. And this movie is what introduced true special effects into the American. I mean, you've seen special effects before, but this one got it to the point where they were saying, "Hey, look what we can do now," and the audience really ate it up. So it wasn't now the Academy has a category for special effects. As a matter of fact, there's special effects, there's makeup. The Academy has learned its lesson. It took them many decades, but they learned their lesson. Great, my light went out. Moving on. So there were this is a pre-code era film. So they were doing, but the studios, RKO had done some shots that even they thought might be a little bit too risque or too alarming. And so, such as Kong's, remember when I said that they had a life-size head and a life-size hand and a life-size foot? Maybe I didn't mention the life-size foot. Because in the early versions of the film, they had edited out that giant foot coming down and stamping on people. But someone at Janus Films found that footage and re-edited it back in 1970. So now you can see all these great, wonderful scenes. Peter Jackson did a remake in 2006. He's a huge Kong fan. And he learned of other scenes that never made it into the film that involved giant spiders and leeches. And so he put those in his film. He also is one of the owners of one of the armatures. It just shows how much people respect and admire this in the industry. What else can I say to convince you to watch Kong? Well, it did save RKO from bankruptcy. You can watch, there was a pretty fun version that came out in 1976. I was pretty excited by that. But really, before you watch those others, watch Kong, because it is the measure by which other horror films are considered. Back, I think it was in the 1970s or 80s, it was deemed one of the 50 U.S. films, the best of all time. I don't know where its ranking is now, but I do know it's still high up there. Watch it, because I consider it a stepping stone film. And it's, like I said, it has legs. It holds up. You will be thoroughly entertained. And you'll know what all the madness is about, why Kong launched so many other interesting and unique films, and why people aspire to become. There's a big Kong resurgence happening now. Anyway, you can watch Kong a couple of different places. You can pay a few dollars and watch it on Prime. If you've got a Max subscription, you can see it there. But it should give you an idea of just how popular this film is and how much people value that it is, it's behind gatekeepers. You're not going to be able to see this film for free. You're going to have to figure out a way to watch it. You might be able to get a DVD of it at the library. I didn't check Canopy to see if it was available there, but I don't think it is. Anyway, 1933's King Kong, a must-see. Certainly one of my top 10 films of all time. And that's my movie recommendation.